I trust that everyone had a nice rest last evening and good breakfast this morning. How's everyone doing? So I believe that we probably are all English speakers in the room at this point. So my name is Alan Inman, and you can find my bio in this really wonderful speaker program booklet that you have in your folders. And of course, you'll find all of our speakers' bios there as well. However, I will read their bios as they come up to present today. But I just want to start one more time. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right. Presenters? Yes. Are we ready to roll? Okay. Well, I'm very, very grateful to be here in this wonderful land of Manila. It is my second time here. I was in Manila in 2009 when we had our very first convention, and I participated in a number of the sessions there. So I'm just thrilled to be returning here. I was able to share with some of the individuals that I spoke with just yesterday that my father was here during World War II, and actually my brother was in the Air Force and stationed here during Vietnam. Just so happens that I know that there are some other military folk in the room, but we won't get into that. But it just so happens that they represent both Army and Air Force, and I see them in the room as we speak. So let's get started, everyone. Our very first presenter this morning is Dr. Marsudi Syuhud. And Dr. Marsudi has served as the General Secretary of the Central Board of Nahdlatul Ulama. Nahdlatul Ulama. Thank you. Even though I practiced that, believe it or not, a dozen times, but but it's also referred to as INU, and that's the way that I'll reference it from this point. However, INU is Indonesia's largest Muslim organization with membership numbering more than 50 million. He is now the chairman of INU in charge of international relations and economic development. He is recognized for his outstanding leadership in addressing and raising awareness about issues of interfaith and peace in Indonesia and in the world. Dr. Marsudi, please. Let's give him a really warm hand.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Blessing and peace of Allah be upon you. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in amma ba'du. Ulama anal kiram wa habaiban al afadil. Masyaikhina wa bil khusus sahibul fadilah hakhinal karim Alan Inman. As a moderator, Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah that I am here with my copy. That's my son. Habli Barakal Jabbar, that later this is youngest generation will continue what we are doing now. Actually, we are here is not only I, myself, but so many leaders from Indonesia. Mr. Shafiq is from Muhammadiyah, also the biggest organization, Muslim organization, and from church, so many. I'll talk about the religious freedom, an essential human right in the case of Indonesia. Indonesia is actually the population almost 250 million people, and at least 300 different ethnic groups with 737 living local languages and different religion. Muslim 87.21%, Protestant 6.96%, Roman Catholic 2.91%, Hindu 1.69%, Buddhist 0.72%, Konghucu 0.06%, and other local religions 0.5%, which is the motto actually is Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity, is the country's largest Muslim in the world, 12.9% from total world Muslim. This is statistic data on 2010. We have a governor, Basuki Cahayapurnama, popularly known by his Chinese nickname, Ahok, became the governor of Jakarta when, as a vice governor, he took over from Joko Widodo, who was elected president of Indonesia in 2014. He was Jakarta's first ethnic Chinese governor and the first non-Muslim for 50 years. His ethnicity and Christian faith made him a double minority in Muslim majority Indonesia. He sought to be elected in his own right in the 2017 governor election. Some Islamic group opposed his campaign, citing a passage of the Holy Quran, notably verse 51 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, which they interpret as a prohibition of Muslim from electing a non-Muslim leader. On 27 September 2016, in a speech in front of citizens of Pulau Seribu, or Thousand Island, he noted that some citizens would not vote for him because they are being deceived using verse 51 of Al-Ma'idah and other things, referring to a verse that some group have cited as a ground to oppose him. The provincial government of Jakarta uploaded the video recording to YouTube in a channel which often feature Basuki's activities. Citizen and Pandit criticized Basuki's statement, considering it an insult on the Holy Quran. In the original video, Ahok says, "Ladies and gentlemen, you have been deceived by the use of Al-Ma'idah 51. This video became viral and Basuki was criticized in social media such as Facebook and Twitter, WhatsApp, a change.org petition criticizing him gained tens of thousands of signatures. Several organizations, including the Islamic Defenders Front, Indonesian acronym FPI, and local Indonesian Ulama Council, reported Basuki to the police, accusing him of having violated Indonesia's law on misuse and insult of religion, according to them. On November 2016, Jakarta protests also called protest defending the Quran, or 4 November protest, refer to a mass protest which took place on 4 November 2016 in Jakarta, Indonesia. It was aimed against the governor of Jakarta, Ahok. Indonesian police deployed 7,000 personnel, very big actually. The protest began around noon with a march from Istiqlal Mosque to the Presidential Palace. But the march was largely peaceful, very peaceful. Estimated for the attendance range from 50,000 until 200,000 protesters. Former Parliament Speaker Amin Rais, Vice Speaker of Parliament Fahri Hamzah and Fadli Zon, as well as celebrities also coming, Ahmad Dhani and Roma Irama, attended the protest. However, after nightfall, past allotted the time for the protest group of angry demonstrators, small, actually not so big, clash with the police, but it's just only small. Vice President Yusuf Kala, who met representative of the protest, promised that the investigation would be completed within 2 weeks. At midnight 5 November, President Joko Widodo held a press conference on the protest and reiterated his commitment to legal action against Ahok. On November 30, this is still last week, November 30, counter-protests were held by a number of Muslims alongside members of other religious communities. Indonesian National Armed Forces Commander Gatot Nurmantio, Minister of Social Affairs Khofifah Indar Parawansa, Indonesian National Police Chief Tito Karnavian, and Islamic activist Yeni Wahid marched in support of Interfaith Unity as a counterbalance to the protest on the 4th of December. On the 4th of December 26, after another but non-violence protest against Ahok was held in National Monument, a counter-protest was held by Muslim and also some people from the government. The protest dubbed as the We Are One Parade, or Parade of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, Parade of Unity in Diversity, was attended also by more than 500,000 people. On February 21, this is just only last week, protesters have been marching toward the House of Representatives, DPR, building in Senayan for the so-called 212 rally. The rally will be staged to demand Home Affairs Minister to suspend Jakarta Governor Basuki Cahayapurnama, or Ahok, for becoming a defendant in a blasphemy case. The initiators of the rally are the Islamic Ummah Forum, FUI, and student organization of Jakarta State University and others. And then, we are as a biggest organization, what should we do? 2 minutes. What should we do as the biggest organization in Indonesia? As I spoke yesterday, as the largest organization in Indonesia, Nahdlatul Ulama sees that Indonesia is a democratic state that gives right of freedom to the people to express their opinions to the public. and it is guaranteed by the law. Nahdlatul Ulama, my organization, also support everyone who want to give their opinion as far as in accordance with the law, peacefully and not with violence, to ensure that democracy in Indonesia is running well, keeping the situation under control and secure. Ahok, although he is a Christian and as a minority, also have a right to be a governor, because also different religion can be a governor or president based on Indonesia law. Nahdlatul Ulama doing as follow for this situation. The first, in the high-level coordination with the government and all stakeholders, with the president, chief of police, and the chief of action, we have a good connectivity, and we already done coordination well with them. Actually, I want to increase just small. Thus, the situation on that time of democracy in Indonesia can work well. The point is that the board of Nahdlatul Ulama required to be able to coordinate and negotiate with all the parties concerned with a good action. The basic capital to be able to do this effort is actually connectivity. Connectivity, as Muhammad said, whoever want to be added the fortune and edge, then connectivity. Thank you. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Everyone, let's give Dr. Marsudi another hand. And not only do we give him a hand, but as he indicated yesterday when he presented to the plenary, how his organization, being the largest Muslim organization in Indonesia, has embraced the other minority religions. And obviously, based on what we just heard in this report, the action speaks for itself. So let's give Dr. Marsudi another hand. Thank you. Thank you. Now we have next John Gallager. John Gallager, who is a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Army, was CEO of the Institute for Global Engagement until 2016. Most recently, he was an advisor to the U.S. presidential transition on cabinet-level appointments. He has also advised top military leaders in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and the Pentagon, and was a White House Fellow on the National Security Council. He taught counterterrorism at West Point, co-authored, edited, Debating the War of Ideas, and was a 2016 Presidential Leadership Scholar. Let us invite up now warmly Colonel retired John Gallager, Lieutenant Colonel, I should say.
All right. Thank you so much, Alan. And I should say that between Alan and Dr. Marsudi, those are the two booming radio voices that you're going to get. I don't have one of those booming radio voices, so I'm going to do my best up here. I've got some slides. My apologies to those in the back, but I thought I'd put a little bit of color into my presentation, so you're going to get a lot of words out of me, but you're also going to get a couple of diagrams and some bullets. I was asked to talk about not just our main topic, religious freedom, a fundamental human right in a free and just society, but something that I'm calling common ground is hallowed ground, right? And this is what we saw yesterday on the panel. There's some shared values across religions, but there's also common ground between nations that equally value these concepts of religious freedom, freedom of conscience, equal citizenship, and human rights that go hand in hand with rule of law. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the U.S. perspective, but what you're going to hear from me, I think, applies beyond the United States. So there's a few quotations here. One is from President Obama, another's from President Bush, quite different politically, and yet listen to the quotations, both delivered at West Point, our military academy. Barack Obama says, global leadership requires us to see the world as it is, but it also requires us to see the world as it should be, where the truths written into our founding documents can steer the currents of history in the direction of justice. George Bush says, our nation's cause has always been a peace that favors human liberty. Peace by encouraging free and open societies on every continent. When it comes to the common rights and needs of men and women, there is no clash of civilizations. British philosopher Roger Scruton says, and I think it applies to what we're all doing here, the enemy is of two kinds, the tyrant dictator and the religious fanatic. To act against the first is feasible, but to act against the second requires a credible alternative to the absolutes which he conjures. It requires us to not merely believe in something, but to put our beliefs into practice. So here, to me, is the big question. The question not only that we're answering, but the question that's been answered from the very beginning of human civilization, and that is, how does a government provide security, justice, and human flourishing while allowing, even enabling, all of its citizens to fully embody their religious and cultural identities and contribute to society's best present and future? After 9/11, 60 U.S. ethicists and scholars got together and they designed 5 what they called fundamental truths about what the United States stands for or what the United States is seeking to promote around the world. In this case, in response to 9/11, this is not meant as a justification for military actions, but what does the United States see itself as standing for, and what do we seek to promote in our engagements around the world? Look at these 5 fundamental truths. One of the authors was my professor at the University of Chicago. 5 fundamental truths pertain to all people without distinction. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. The legitimate role of government is to protect and help to foster conditions for human flourishing. Human beings naturally desire to seek the truth about life's purpose and ends. Freedom of conscience and religious freedom are inviolable rights of the human person. And finally, killing in the name of God is contrary to faith in God and is the greatest betrayal of the universality of religious faith. I think you could say that last one in a different way. You could phrase it suicide terrorism as God's creation, killing God's creation in the name of God. No matter what your religious tradition, the God that created you did not outsource the creation of your enemy to some other God. Which means if you kill someone in the name of God, you are God's creation, killing God's creation in the name of God. Frankly, I consider nothing more illegitimate. So why are these fundamental truths so uncommon in the actual practice of governance around the world? I actually think it's an important thing that we talk about in the Q&A. I'll touch on it now. If there is so much common ground on some of these principles about religious freedom, stability, and human rights, then why are they so uncommon in the way that governments actually govern? So you might look at this diagram. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but many, if not most, governments in the world struggle to provide good governance and equal citizenship. That is, they're really only capable of providing governance to a portion of their citizens, and that results in a partial social contract and striking deals with some citizens who are on the inside, leaving a whole bunch of other citizens who might be different ethnically or religiously on the outside. In order to stay in power, these governments engage in corruption. As people become marginalized and persecuted, they go into a state of latent protest. Over time, the latent protest becomes active protest, and there's violence on the periphery between those who are haves and have-nots. This is not all that uncommon. I would submit it's probably more common than good governance and equal citizenship around the world. If you were to engage some of these governments and ask them to promote religious freedom and human rights, they might even say, we want to. We believe that is the future. It's the way to a more stable society, but we can't do it. We seldom talk about why governments who would like to promote religious freedom and human rights never actually get there. That doesn't say all governments want to, but there are many who do, and they've painted themselves into a corner. Here are some reasons why even those with the best intentions don't deliver on religious freedom and human rights. One, governments fear that if they take steps in the direction of reform, they will lose control of the pace of change, and they will lose power. Two, the heckler's veto. Imagine for a moment you're the leader of a country and you want to extend religious freedom to everyone, but the majority religion or the majority citizens say, you will not disrupt the balance of power in society, or we will throw you out, or we will criticize you, or we will threaten you. So suddenly an entire hillside of people, if you can imagine, are heckling the government and saying, we don't want you to promote religious freedom to the minorities because we like the balance of power the way it is. Reform is hard. Even in countries that get good governance right, change in bureaucracy and governance is quite hard. Four, other priorities can preserve the status quo. There could be security issues, economic issues, a whole host of other reasons that they just don't get to this, and partner nations around the world continue to help those governments and prop them up even when they don't reform because other issues seem to be taking priority. Five, marginalized groups over time start to become affiliated with violence. They might have splinter groups off to the side who've engaged in public violence, and then it taints the entire group, and nobody wants to extend religious freedom to them because they are extremists, if you will. And then finally, this is a deeply personal issue of national identity, and when nations aren't doing it right and other nations come along and say, we want to help you promote religious freedom, nations with pride and deep heritage say, thanks for your help, but no, you don't understand us, we're fine. These are some of the obstacles. This is what it should look like. Good governance at the top, an inclusive social contract, connected to civil society through rule of law and equal citizenship. These ideas and institutions equal the common ground. People can settle their differences through these institutions. They don't have to reach for their guns. The result is economic and social well-being and engagement with civil society. I think in many ways this is the ideal. There's no shortcut to this, to justice and human flourishing. It's a nexus between governance and statecraft, rule of law and equal citizenship, and religious liberty. And in the United States, we sometimes refer to this moment in 1787 that gave birth to our modern Constitution as the miracle at Philadelphia, where the Constitutional Convention took place. I will leave you with these key questions. As you look at a nation to determine whether or not the way that nation engages religion, whether it will promote religious freedom or stifle it, consider these questions. Is a majority religion the organizing construct of governance, and that it seeks to guide, direct, or control the public and private spheres? Or perhaps the state's political ideology acts like a majority religion, suppressing freedom of belief? Does the government extend full citizenship to non-religious or other religious people and groups? Does the government allow dialogue, criticism about policy and law through a political process? And finally, does the religion allow for criticism and even exit from the religion, which is an inherent check on the potential abuse of power? Finally, I'll give you this slide. I say take your pick. On the left is a painting I bought in Myanmar or Burma of a little girl, age 12, looking down at her costume and thinking she's never looked more beautiful. What type of future does she have? Here is a Filipino girl in custom traditional clothing. This is a picture of my 12-year-old daughter. We have to decide the type of world we want to live in, where these girls grow up with a chance at religious freedom, human rights, gender equality, education, or another world where the ideologies of ISIS or, for example, Lenin in this other picture dominate. Thank you for your time.
There are no shortcuts to achieving those, justice and human flourishing. Let's give Lieutenant Colonel John Gallager another hand. Thank you. We now have Dr. Chandra Setiawan, who is the chairman of the Global Peace Foundation Indonesia and commissioner of the Commission for the Supervision of Business Competition, and also Republic of Indonesia. He also serves as advisor to Rector of the President University in Indonesia. He's the co-founder of the Indonesian Conference on Religion and Peace, and a member of the Priesthood Council of MATAKIN, the Supreme Council for the Confucian religion in Indonesia. He also previously served as a commissioner of the Indonesia National Commission on Human Rights. Let us welcome up Dr. Chandra. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. How are you? Oh, Excellency. This my presentation about religious freedoms, essential human rights in pluralistic and just society. Yeah. This is my scope of presentations, but some of my presentations already mentioned by John, so I will elaborate to complete John's presentations. The introductions, we know together that religion is a very powerful force and also human rights for all. So religion and human rights cannot be separated. Yes, freedom of religions or beliefs is a fundamental right. Yeah, every society should have benefits from the full and unhindered practice or religion or belief. Full respect for these basic human rights can be a powerful force of preventing killing and ending conflicts. Experience has shown that peaceful coexistence across religious, ethnic, or national borders is only possible if the freedom have a religion or belief and to change one religion. But we cannot get this all maybe in some places. Religions, I believe I will explain a little. Religion seeks adherence of it revealed truth, who will believe the truth and put it into practice. Thus, one religion's primary rules is to minister to its adherents to define the path to God and eternal life, as well as to prescribe the requirements towards the end. In addressing religious diversity, religious organizations often perceive other faiths as rivals in competitions for adherence, resources, and territory. This has happened also in Indonesia. That's explained also by Dr. Marsudi. This reality has often impacted the interactions among faiths and has been at the heart of religiously turmoil. Freedoms and are independent. Fundamental freedom is needed, as explained by Roosevelt. There are 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. This is talking about the freedom. But how about a religious freedom? Declarations of United Nations, especially in 1981, declarations of the eliminations of all form of intolerance and discriminations based on religion or belief, elaborated on the basic rights and freedoms set out in Article 18 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other relevant provisions, call on states to take all effective measures necessary to prevent and eliminate the discriminations and appropriate measures necessary to combat intolerance on the grounds of religions or the beliefs. This declaration further expresses the convictions of the international community that freedoms of religion or belief can contribute to the attainment of world peace, social justice, and friendships among people. Dialogue and discussions between the world's religion is important. It is evidence that tolerance and respect for other religions and belief will make the world peace more peaceful world. This is a very important concept that we should know if we are talking about the core of human rights to freedom of religions and belief. First, internal freedom. What means by internal freedoms? This is related with the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religions. The rights include freedom for all to have, adopt, maintain, or change religion or belief. This is internal freedom called. External freedom, this everyone has the freedom to express manifestations, their religions, belief and teaching, practice, worship, and observance. That is called external freedom. Non-coercion. No one shall be subject to coercions that would impair his or her religions to have or to adopt a religion or belief in his or her choice. Non-discriminations, rights of parents and guardians, corporate freedoms and legal status. For example, organizations that should have right to have a legal status to over religions practices, for example. Limits to permissible restrictions on internal, external freedoms. This is for the government or legislations to make the restrictions. And non-derogability right. States may take no derogations from the rights or the freedom or religion or belief, not even in times of public emergency. So freedom of religion is non-derogability right. So the limitations, government legislations due to the protection of public safety, public order, public health, public protections of morals, protections of the fundamental rights and freedom of others, like blasphemy, freedom of others. This is the government or legislation can do the limitations by issue the act or laws. So I want to mention some notions to the right of freedom or religions. First, the fact freedoms of religions or belief can never be separated from other human rights and fundamental freedoms. Among these other human rights and fundamental freedoms are the right to life, the right to physical, mental, and moral integrity of the human persons, the right to peaceful assembly and associations, the right to freedom of opinion and expressions, the right not to be subject to arbitrary arrests and detentions, the right to leave one's country and to return to it, the right to prosperity, the rights to education, and so on. This is, we should pay attention. And the second basic notions pertains to the inherent link between freedom of religions or belief and the imperative standard of non-discriminations on the grounds of religions and belief. Religious non-discrimination implies and means that nobody should be infringed in the exercise of civil and political rights. The third fundamental notion relates to the facts. In many situations, it is not the government, but religious institutions, affiliations, and movements which cause religious divisions and antagonism and incite to acts of religious extremism and violence. The building of understanding, respect, and tolerance between people of different religions and belief, and also among people of the same religion or belief, requires strenuous and persistent joint effort by intergovernmental and non-governmental community alike. In this connection, interreligious dialogue must be actively pursued as a means to foster respect, understanding, and tolerance. The fourth essential consideration addresses the notion of tolerance and respect and flow immediately from the collaborations of the intergovernmental and non-governmental community alike. For the sake of promoting and protecting freedom of religion or belief, the respect of rights of individuals, persons, collective must be pursued first and foremost over the search for objective truth. Consequently, emphasis must be given to the promotion of constructive dialogue between religious communities themselves, between these communities and the public authorities in spirit of tolerance and respect. Sharing religious values in pluralistic and just society, living in a secular, pluralistic society, one of the duties of any religious communities must be realized this. So we live with the pluralistic society. In religious communities, religion has a vital place in human life. It opens the heart to ultimate. Religion is essential experience of all human societies. Thus, it cannot be repressed as atheistic regimes not fully neglected as is some secular states. In pluralistic society, religious community maintains a certain power, but they must be careful to avoid the temptations to identify religion with a particular political party. This can prompt them in a dangerous direction. Religions must focus on how to make religious values instruments for a better society. Religions should promote freedom, justice, care for the creation, respect for the freedom of conscience for all, not only for those who belong to our religious group. In the struggle to overcome violence, the religious communities can offer an essential contribution such as principle of eternal value, efficiency of peace and reconciliation, living examples, and the power of continuous self-criticism and renewal. In order to be successful, need to direct involvement on the part of religious leaders and communities and also government. Thus, dialogue between leaders and other trusted members of religious communities, NGOs, scholars, and representatives of governments should be encouraged. Discussing common concerns, listening to others, and exchange ideas to promote tolerance and freedom of religion and belief. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Chandra actually reminds us that religious rights and human rights can sometimes differ. However, he points out that tolerance and respect must be always recognized, and that respect for the freedom of conscience is part and parcel to religious freedom. Let us again thank Dr. Chandra and give him a warm hand. We now have our last presenter, and it is Archbishop Antonio Ledesma, who is from the Philippines. He is the Archbishop of the Metropolitan Archdiocese of Cagayan de Oro. I hope that I'm at least phonetically pronouncing it properly. Let me hear it from you. How do we say? Okay. And was ordained as a Jesuit priest in 1973. He was formerly vice president of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines and has served as the chair of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines Commission on Interreligious Dialogue. Let us welcome up Archbishop Ledesma.
To our distinguished guests here and also panelists. today is Ash Wednesday for Catholics, and that is why we have ashes on the forehead. It's the beginning of the Lenten season. And I recall in Cagayan de Oro, during also the season of the Ramadan, we Catholics and Protestant Christians also joined the Muslims in visiting their mosques in order to show that we respect the religious traditions of everyone. So it is in that sense that I would like to share with you the maybe religious freedom from the perspective of the Catholic tradition. Maybe starting from my own perspective, in Mindanao, we have had a situation of violence over the past decades, and I was the Bishop of Ipil in 1996. A year earlier, there was what we call the Ipil Raid, which was attributed to some of the terrorist groups at that time, including the Abu Sayyaf, which only a few days ago was also responsible for the beheading of German tourists. But it is in that situation, I think, of intercultural and interreligious conflict that we find ourselves in. On the other hand, maybe briefly summarizing it, in Mindanao, over the past 20 years now, since 1996, we have also formed Bishops' Ulama Conference, or Forum, where religious leaders of both groups have been talking about peace building and also respect for each other's religions. And we have also included a Mindanao Week of Peace, where every last Thursday of November, we encourage all communities in Mindanao to have activities for interreligious dialogue. But in a sense, the Catholic tradition starts from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And listening yesterday to the panelists, it starts as early as the First Amendment of the American Constitution, non-establishment clause, or freedom of religion for everyone. So we recall in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it mentions there that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is, you might say, a common code of conduct for the nations of the world. On the other hand, as I mentioned, in Mindanao, we have still the situation of what sometimes has been called oftentimes it has been described in several periods of the past 20 years as the Battle of Mindanao. Although, again, we religious leaders, both among the bishops and the ulama, have always stressed that the two religions are religions of peace, Islam and Christianity. So we continue with the Catholic tradition that during the time of Pope John the 23rd in 1963, he came out with the social encyclical Pacem in Terris. And briefly quoting from that, it includes, also among men's rights is that of being able to worship God in accordance with the right dictates of his own conscience and to profess his religion both in private and in public. Pacem in Terris, or Peace on Earth, is the document of the Catholic Church that gives a systematic view of human rights. It is perhaps also an application and follow-up of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If you recall, in 1963, it was also the time of the Cold War. and it was a time of maybe persecution of many religious communities in communist countries. In 1965, 2 years later, or during that time also, the Second Vatican Council, Ecumenical Vatican Council, was convened by John the 23rd, and one of the key documents, in fact, some would say one of the revolutionary documents of the Council, was the Declaration on Religious Freedom. In Latin, it is Dignitatis Humanae. And again, we read, the Vatican Council declares that the human person has a right to religious freedom. Freedom of this kind means that all men should be immune from coercion on the part of individuals, social groups, and every human power, so that within due limits nobody is forced to act against his convictions, nor is anyone to be restrained from acting in accordance with his convictions in religious matters, in private or in public, alone or in association with others. Incidentally, one of the main drafters of this declaration was Father John Courtney Murray, an American Jesuit, and observers have mentioned that he really has brought in the tradition of the American Constitution into this Declaration on Religious Freedom. Part of the focus here is that religious freedom does not only include freedom to seek the truth and or freedom for those who have the truth or freedom of conscience, but it also is based really on human dignity, that every person has human dignity that should be respected. And in that sense, religious freedom is an extension of the protection of human dignity. So another focus is on the dictates of conscience, and this is exemplified especially in the document of the Second Vatican Council, Gaudium et Spes, or the Declaration of the Church in the Modern World, where it tries to describe conscience as man has in his heart a law inscribed by God. His dignity lies in observing this law, and by it he will be judged. By conscience that law is made known, which is fulfilled in the love of God and of one's neighbor. So respecting everyone's conscience is also respecting his human dignity. Again, to continue, this is conscience and freedom. Man's dignity therefore requires him to act out of conscience and free choice, as moved and drawn in a personal way from within, and not by blind impulses in himself or by mere external constraint. This brings the distinction made earlier between internal freedom and external freedom. On the other hand, the Declaration on Religious Freedom also points out the responsibility of each one to seek the truth. God calls men to serve him in spirit and in truth. Consequently, they are bound to him in conscience, but not coerced. And it is in that sense that the Declaration on Religious Freedom is seen to respect, again, everyone's inherent right to seek the truth. And obligation to seek the truth is from within, not from without, not by governments or not by any other group or religious community. Respecting religious freedom, therefore, also means providing the basis for interreligious dialogue. That respecting the freedom of every religious community also means that we can collectively seek the truth together by sharing the insights of every religious group. And it is in that sense that in 1986, Pope John Paul II also convened a World Day of Prayer for Peace in Assisi. And since then, the Catholic Church has also continued this tradition of inviting leaders of world religions to come together to pray for peace. Because in a sense, coming together is already a symbolic way of showing that we are one common family under God. It is in this sense also that we can look at the focus on interreligious dialogue And here, a statement from Nostra Aetate, the document, another document of Vatican II on relations with non-Christian religions. It is really the decree on interreligious dialogue. And I quote, "The Catholic Church rejects nothing of what is true and holy in these religions. She has a high regard for the manner of life and conduct, the precepts and doctrines, which, although differing in many ways from her own teaching, nevertheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men." I would add that these other religions also often provide striking examples of love of God and love of neighbor that are central to all faith communities and signs of God's presence in the world. In many ways, Pope Francis called the present Pope today for a culture of encounter, so strikingly manifested in his apostolic visit to the Philippines in 2015, opens new directions, where one meets the other in a personalized way, touching the wounds of the other and sharing God's mercy and compassion. Parenthetically, in the Philippines, from a historical point of view, we have experienced two kinds of maybe atmospheres or regimes. The first one was during the Spanish colonial period of 333 years, where we had, in a sense, union of church and state. There would only be one official Catholic religion. But when the Americans came in by the turn of the century, 1898 up to almost a half a century, we had separation of church and state. So it was, you might say, a diametrical opposite of the previous 3 centuries. But it is in that sense, I think, that today, in our own constitution, we have learned to follow the principle of separation of church and state, but not in a sense of separating faith from society. And it is the need for, in fact, now the challenge in the Philippine situation is how to include values formation in public school education. And this is where many religious leaders, either Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, are saying that we have to bring in religious values also in the form of values formation. Going back to the Philippine experience of 300 years under Spain and 50 years under the United States, one observer has said that we lived for 300 years in a convent and 50 years in Hollywood. But now we are trying to trace our own history in terms of really showing how interreligious dialogue can be carried out, especially in a situation like the current situation in Mindanao, where we are now trying to work out a peace process negotiation, and where the religious leaders of both sides, Christian and Muslim, have come periodically together to say that we are religions of peace. And it is that hope that together with interreligious dialogue, especially among the, you might say, the top religious leaders, we can share the message to all the members of our religious communities that we should work for peace. In fact, in one sense, the Bishops' Ulama Conference has been cited by some observers that it is unusual that in other conflict areas in the world, there is no interreligious dialogue among the religious leaders. But in the context of Mindanao, despite the occasional violence in some parts, the religious leaders, both Christian and Muslim, have always come together to condemn the violence. And I think the condemnation of violence by both sides is also a way of moderating the violence, to show that both religious traditions do not subscribe to violence and always seek and respect the freedom of religion for everyone. Thank you.
So we hear from Archbishop Ledesma a very vital lesson. And that is, first of all, that no matter what, you cannot separate faith from society, and that religion must be a religion of peace, and that in a circumstance where there are challenges or violence, all religious leaders from all different religious perspectives must condemn violence. Let us again give Archbishop Ledesma a warm hand. Only ask questions, please. If you want to make a comment, it has to be one sentence only, or I, your moderator, the sergeant in arms, at arms, will stop you. We agree? Do we agree? Yes, sir. All right.
My question is very simple.
Okay.
Every religion is based on a particular sacred text. My question is, do we follow the teachings of our texts, or that we follow only rituals?
Very good question. So I will let those that are in front of us that are religious leaders respond.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
In our interreligious dialogue among bishops and ulama, we have shared citations from the sacred scriptures of both the Quran and the Bible. And certainly from the Bible itself, the Beatitude, "Blessed are the peacemakers," would be one key quotation. Our Muslim brothers and sisters have also mentioned their own citation from the Quran. And something like, if you want peace, you must have peace with your brethren. But I think it can be better cited by our Muslim brothers here.
Actually, the case of Ahok as a president, as a governor in Jakarta, and he is as a Christian. Actually, this is as the Constitution of Indonesia. The Constitution of Indonesia is the result of consultation. Consultation, it's referred to the Holy Quran, is on Ali Imran 155. Washawirhum fil amri, fa'idha azamta fatawakkal 'ala Allah, innallaha yuhibbul mutawakkilin. Washawirhum fil amri, and consult them in the affair. Fa'idha azamta, then when you have taken a decision, fatawakkal 'ala Allah, put your trust in Allah. Innallaha yuhibbul mutawakkilin. Allah loves those who put their trust in Allah. Indonesian Constitution allow non-Muslim become a president. Non-Muslim become a governor. And everything according to the law of Indonesia, according to the Constitution. Based on the Islamic teaching, everything must be in consultation, and it's already agreed by the founders of Indonesia. Because in Islam teaching also, we refer to the Holy Quran, washawirhum fil amri, fa'idha azamta fatawakkal 'ala Allah. And this constitution already agreed by the people of Indonesia.
I think theoretically, it's possible that when a particular religion converges with or aligns itself with state authority, for a time, the very best virtues of that religion would dominate and direct that there be human dignity and toleration and dialogue across religions. I don't think it will last. And history shows us that that hasn't typically lasted because, unfortunately, and I'll speak about the period of Christianity's collective fanaticism. Christianity thought that Catholicism thought that Galileo needed to die because Galileo posited that the earth rotated around the sun, not the sun around the earth. Why would he need to lose his life over that? Because the Catholic Church had converged with or united with state power and had a public position that differed from that. So suddenly, if Galileo is to be believed, he's now challenging the legitimacy and authority of the Catholic Church and its ability to receive divine revelation. Suddenly, right, what may have started with good intentions became an abuse of power, and now dissent is marginalized. So when I read those 5, quote, fundamental truths, government's role is to provide for justice, human flourishing, freedom of conscience, religious freedom, killing in the name of God, or the concept of constitutionalism in the US, or Pancasila in Indonesia. These are principles that are being placed just slightly above any particular religious tradition in the context of good governance to allow all religious traditions to flourish. I was in Myanmar. I met with Syuhud, the number 2 Buddhist in the country. He talked about the elevation of Buddhism to a level even higher than governance in Myanmar, thinking that the more Buddhism was prominent, the more there would be brotherly love and toleration. You understand theoretically this is possible, but historically, in an applied sense, it doesn't tend to hold up. So I'm skeptical.
The question, panelists, how do we organize both religious life and governmental life for the betterment of all? Is that close? Yes. Okay.
As I mentioned before, that's in the freedom of religions, government have the rules to protect the human rights of other citizens. So that's why government should set up the rules and regulations about how to protect public safety. This is very important. So clearly define what's meant by public safety, manifestations of religion. Sometimes the manifestations of religions bring problems. How the government deal with this? For example, to establish the worship places. How the government make the rules, equal rules, also consider of the municipal, of the regional matters, of course, not universal as national rules. Because if establishing the worship place must be different level. Sometimes in the national level cannot be implemented in the rural area, for example. This must be regulated in a very clear basis. And the protection of public order. This is also must be very clear what mean by public order. Sometimes the police misuse their power because they do not differentiate what mean by public order. Because of the public order, and then the police cause religious leaders, for example. That is very, very important to establish the good regulations, law, how to define what mean by public order. And of course, regarding the protections of morals, this is also a gray area sometimes. For example, in Indonesia, Bali Island is a difference compared to other islands, for example. There are many tourists, how they behave, how they wear the clothes, for example. Sometimes in our many Muslims community, like Aceh, maybe, they think this is immoral to use the clothes that you can see. But yeah, very, very short. But in Bali, it's no problem. So how we differentiate this very clear with the local wisdom also. And of course, regarding for the freedom of others, blasphemy. This is also very important. So among the religious leader also must conduct like code of ethics. I think this is also important beside the regulations. Thank you.
Ahmadiyah already come into Indonesia during 1927. Until now. The office of Ahmadiyah actually in Yogyakarta, Mr. Safik known well, this is just only side by side with my office and your office. You can see and you can come to Yogyakarta and it's still running well. Just only, this is my office and your office, and in front of my office and your office in the area of Yogyakarta and Ahmadiyah. It's coming before Independent Day of Indonesia during 1927 until now. But I do not know if it is far from Nahdlatul Ulama office. But it's still okay. For the question of Mr. Safi'i that how to answer some issues actually recently. Sometimes the situation is different. The issue also different. Political issues, government issues, ummah issues, and religion issues. It happened everywhere. Maybe not only in Indonesia, also in America. Someone do not agree with another one. And they bring in the name of religion and put this in front of us like this. But actually, to answer this situation, this problem, we can quote the verse of Quran. Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dzakari wa untha, wa ja'alnakum syu'uban wa qabaila lita'arufu. We created by the God with differences, many differences. Different, like our language is different, our face is different, our color is different, also our religion is different. What is the purpose? The purpose is just only for understanding each other. If we have understood each other, of course, we will have a good connectivity among us. This is the basic. We should understand each other. Usually, when the protester in Indonesia, a big protester, because I myself did this, because I have a connectivity with other leaders of religion. In the Muslim organization in Indonesia, there are more than 12 Muslim organizations, many. And we have, and I myself have a good connectivity with them. Until they have a program to make a demonstration in front of the palace. And from the street, Nahdlatul Ulama didn't agree the demonstration in the street on that time. And I asked them to move to special place. I just come and discuss with the leader of protester, Habib Rizik, Bakhtiar Nasir, and Zaitun. I come there and I said, discuss with them. Can you move from the street to the specific place? Discussion with the argument. Also Nahdlatul Ulama argument with the Islamic argument. according to one of the ulama said, one of the imams said that Friday praying in the street is not allowed. But based on the one of the imam said. And then I discussed with this leader, protester. Don't take your different opinion. It's just wasting the time. If you move from the street to the specific area that allowed by the government, maybe many members of NU will join you. Then they move. This is an argument that also I give to them. Discussion, consultation, washawirhum fil amri. From the demonstration, and then we change the idea of demonstration to be a dhikr, mass dhikr, tahlil, tahmid, solawah. For demonstration, we can change to be what we call spiritually praying. Demonstration changing to be praying in the yard. How can we make this? We make this because we have a good relationship with them. This is the key, is connectivity with others. Thank you.
I think that's the issue. It's always the issue. And it goes back to the question, do we really follow our own scriptures? I mean, it's all really the same question. Religions have within them certain virtues that allow them to be passed on from generation to generation, because mothers believe whispering this in the ears of the children they love will give them a life of happiness and meaning and truth and communion with God in the afterlife. But religions also have dimensions to them that allow for self-preservation, to stiffen themselves a little bit against attack from government or against competition from other religious beliefs. You'll find those qualities in every religion. So the question is, how do religions in practice focus on the virtues that constitute the common ground we're talking about today, and not allow those other dimensions of self-preservation or maybe even certain hardline attitudes to become dominant? That's sort of the question. When a religion goes from an individual family setting to being applied in a polity, that's where it starts to get messy. Because, as I said in my talk, most governments are capable of providing governance, benefits, privileges to some, distributing burdens and obligations to others unequally. And when that happens, people begin to compete for scarce resources, whether the resource is justice, whether the resource is political power, whether the resource is just food or shelter. And as people begin to compete for these things in imperfect and unequal governance, they revert to their baseline affiliation. Who's going to give me the most protection? Who's going to give me the most strength? Who's going to be my teammate in the struggle? And that's when you start to see these fissures develop along religious lines. Ideally, governments extend citizenship to all their citizens so that the border of citizenship is the same border as the nation's border. And then people settle their differences through institutions that are accessible to all. Again, this is not the standard in the world. It's not the norm, but it's what we're shooting for. And I think it's why we're here, because we're trying to figure out how to get there. But hey, this is a fallen world, and we all deserve dignity, but we're all wretched human beings, and we're trying to figure it out.
This has been really wonderful. I really hope that we had a scribe somewhere that recorded this. I think we did. And we need to have this represented in a way that we can all digest and perhaps incorporate it even in our daily lives. Thank you so very much, each of you. But give our panelists another warm hand. We have Archbishop Ledesma, we have Dr. Marsudi, we have Dr. Chandra, and we have Lieutenant Colonel retired John Gallager. Give them all a warm hand. Thank you.